If you're in the market for a car, you know things are not as easy as they once were. Namely, there are lingering concerns about availability and affordability. And of course, there's the rise of EVs. But we are here to help with all that and much more in this edition of What's Driving the DMV. I'm your host, John Aaron. Joining me are three local experts who know exactly what dealerships are dealing with right now. They're Mike Walker, General Manager of BMW of Fairfax, Matthew Bibbo, General Manager of BMW Mini of Sterling and Washington Exotics, where you can get a Bugatti, Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, or McLaren, and Patrick Coleman, President of Jim Coleman Automotive, whose brands include Nissan, Cadillac, Toyota, Infiniti, Honda, Land Rover, and Jaguar. So first off, a lot of people are wondering, can they find the car that they want? We've gone through the pandemic. We've heard of inventory problems. Patrick, you have all these brands that you deal with.
Sure.
Can people find the car that they want?
I think it depends quite a bit on what brand they're looking for, because every manufacturer right now is in a little bit of a different situation. Some we've seen recover very quickly. Some are still kind of getting over the hump. We've seen some of our brands like Infiniti and Nissan that have bounced back very quickly. Productions are up. There's a lot of availability there. And there's also deals to be had at brands like that right now.
Mike, what's the story with BMW?
BMW has done a remarkable job. That brand did a terrific job all throughout the pandemic. In 21, the brand, we have 15 BMW stores with Sonic Automotive. We sold more cars in 21, new BMWs, than we did in 19. 22 better and 23 is on pace to be better. I credit the job they did navigating everything. Now, the difference is, and Matt can tell you the same thing, and Patrick as well, maybe not exactly what you want content-wise. There's a few sacrifices here and there. But all in all, a pretty terrific job, which is helping the consumer right now have a little bit better price point than maybe they've experienced over the last couple of years.
Yeah, Matt, I want you to jump in. BMW and Mini never really known for having huge inventories. So, where do things stand now?
I think we're starting to get back to a little bit of where it was, but like Mike said, I think the cadence of how cars are coming and what models are coming, it's not quite where it was. So sometimes you'll get a flow of a certain model, and maybe that model will be decontented a little bit with certain things. So it is coming back. The inventory is starting to come in more than it was, but there's some little niches and things that are different than how it was maybe a couple of years ago. On the exotic car side, it's very different.
Sure.
Those brands are oftentimes sold out, for a couple of years down the road. I mean, Lamborghini is sold out, for 24 months, and McLaren a good part of the pipeline also. So that's different. But I will say on that side too, the availability of certain options has slowed some of that production a little bit. But overall, the real volume brands are starting to come back to maybe where they were. I don't know if you all agree, but I wouldn't necessarily say where it was. But there's more than we had, 18 months ago.
The day supply is not as great. We're probably 30, 35 days supply, and we probably ran 55, 60, 65, at times a 70-day supply of cars. So day supply is down. Again, certain brands have done a better job than others. Maybe the relationships and contracts that they had with their suppliers and who those suppliers were, right, had a lot to do with it. But again, we're fortunate to have been with a brand that navigated it so well.
So what does that mean for customers when you have that kind of day supply? Are they coming in and finding the car they want, or are you ordering it for them?
Most of them are orders still. We probably have, pre-pandemic, we probably had 10 to 15% of our entire pipeline was sold, had a name on it. Now it can be anywhere from 50 to 65%. That was 85% for a while. Almost everybody that came in had to put their name on something in the pipeline, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months. Now you could find something on the ground. You've got a reasonable chance of finding something on the ground. If not on the ground, maybe just a few weeks away, depending on how you want it built. If you're fairly flexible, and we see ones 2 weeks out that matches 90% of what you want. And I think it's a little bit easier to trade with each other now because there's a fair amount of availability. If Matt needs something from me or Pat needs something from me, odds are I can probably find something they've got something to give back. Whereas before, for about a year and a half, we weren't even calling each other because it was a waste of time.
Now, Patrick, for your more mainstream brands, the Toyotas of the world, what's the ordering process like that? Because I imagine, that, I imagine it's very different than ordering a BMW where you're checking off all these different options.
Yeah, it's not as much of that a la carte. It's more just kind of customers coming in, and we find there's a lot more flexibility as well when you're not looking for a luxury car. You're looking for something that's just more kind of reliable transportation. I think we're starting for quite a while. You were in a place where we were a couple months out as well. I think finally we're getting to a place now where we've actually got some cars in stock to see, which is something that we found that our customers appreciate. Is for the last 2-3 years they've had to order things, they haven't been able to test drive, they haven't been able to kind of sit down in the car and get a feel for it and things like that. So I think we're finally getting back to that place where at least there's enough inventory to come in and take a look at some of the options, because that's one thing customers have kind of been deprived of these last few years. It's one thing to be searching on a website and kind of picking through different options online. It's a whole nother thing to be able to come into the dealership and actually physically see a car and see if you fit well in it and see how it drives and see these types of things. So we've seen some improvement there, just in that there's at least some units that are in stock that are available to look at, and I think that's a big advantage for both ourselves and the customers to be able to do that.
Yeah, Matt and Mike, what do you guys do when people order a car but don't necessarily even know what the car is about? And again, this is a problem that you probably had before the pandemic, because you have so many different trim levels, options, all of those kinds of things. Matt, you can jump in first. How do you deal with it when people order a car and then maybe it's not what they expected?
Well, one thing we did pre-pandemic, I think, really well is, with BMW and a lot of brands, when people come in for service, they'll jump into a service loaner. And pre-pandemic, those service loaners existed of all new car inventory. I mean, 100% of it was new car inventory. And certain specs were certain cars were spec'd certain ways, and the customers got a chance to kind of touch and feel different models and different options, so would have a pretty good idea of what they want. During the pandemic, that went away, and people were basically driving used cars in the service department. We're kind of back to more new cars now. So they're able to get a feel for what I think they want and maybe don't want. And then if something were to come in, maybe not how they want it or how they choose, with the level of availability right now, I can look to someone like Mike for an inventory piece that maybe fits that a little bit better, or depending on where we are in the allocation process, I can pop an order in that can get that car there pretty quick. So that doesn't happen all that often. I don't know if you agree, but most BMWs are kind of contented, very similar. I'm with Lithium Motors, a public company. There's 350 plus stores nationwide. So, other brands that we have where, Lexus, Toyota, it's sometimes I think more about just the color that you want than really the package content, because, it's basically built similar. Yeah. They're all sort of constructed similar. It's kind of the same with BMW. There's a few things that you can get crazy and tweak and do, but if you're speccing a car for inventory, oftentimes they're specced very similar. Fair?
Fair. I think there's enough inventory to get somebody a real good feel for what they want. And then as far as packages and options, safety features, there's enough information that we can provide them to make a decision whether it works for them. But at the end of the day, if a car comes in, they're not happy with it, and it's not a matter of color, it's just they're not happy, I'm not going to jam them up. No hard feelings, here's your deposit, because I'm going to find a home for it pretty quick.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if I walk into your dealership and say, I want to order this particular car, I run down everything that I want, walk me through exactly how that process goes, and am I still getting a deal on it?
Yeah, depending on what it is, absolutely you'll get a deal. I'm more inclined to give a more aggressive price on something that's in the order bank. If you come in, lock you down, done, and I know I'm going to deliver your car in August, September, we're all set, I'd much rather give a deal on that vehicle than one that's on the lot that somebody wants right now. We still don't have enough vehicles to where I'm going to give something away that's on the lot, because you have some folks don't have the luxury of ordering a car. They totaled a car, right? A car got flooded, a car broke down. They need a car today. And it's just business. That car will probably demand more on the need. Back in the day when the lot was full of cars, the car on the ground is the one that was the deal. For me, it's backwards. I'd rather give you a terrific deal and just put your name on one, call you in 6 or 8 weeks. We'll build it. We'll both review that spec sheet. You'll sign off on it. I'll take a deposit. And then you can track your own car with BMW and see where it is in the process.
Yeah.
But the deal, the deal's on the order, actually.
Patrick, what are your thoughts, and how does it differ between the brands?
Yeah, I would agree with what Mike said there. I will say it's each manufacturer has a different ordering process, and each manufacturer makes different information available to the customers along the way through that journey. I will say if they come into the dealership, it's very important still that they have a good relationship with whoever it is they're working with, whether that be a salesperson or general manager or even someone in ownership. It's very important that they can kind of trust who it is that they're dealing with, because it's not just a one-day transaction. More than likely, they'll be reaching out to one another over, could be a couple weeks, could be a couple month process, and you're going to want to make sure you're dealing with someone who's informative, who's engaged, someone who's providing you consistent updates, because this situation is very fluid in many cases. So, with that in mind, you're going to want to make sure you're connected with someone who's kind of proactive.
Do you think you can get that level of connection online, as most people like to do, or do you think you should really get in, meet your salesperson or someone else and build a relationship that way? I
think customers are pretty intuitive, and they can probably gather through an online exchange what type of person it is that they're dealing with. And you go to different dealerships, not every experience is going to be the same. So I would encourage them to kind of initiate that process online if that's what they're comfortable with, and just get a sense of who they're dealing with and how informative that person seems, and then gauge if it's someone that they want to proceed with and move forward with. We still have a lot of customers that like to come in, the local in our community, and just come in, and customers that we have relationships with that want to continue and expand on those relationships. So those folks, we love dealing with them as well, and it's always great to see some of the friendly faces that we've been accustomed to dealing with for many years.
Don't you think, the internet's been around, since the 90s, right? It's been probably longer than that. But certain brands, information is there. You can execute your transaction 100% online for the most part, aside for motor vehicle documents that might need a wet signature. But you can even do that remotely.
Sure.
Send it out, notarize it, and bring it back. But certain brands, I think customers still want to. It's not transactional. It's they have a relationship with the car, and they want to get in it. They want to feel the touch points. BMW, for example, very big on touch points. How it feels where you're sitting, what your hands touch, how that feels. And I think that experience, I still find that customers, yes, they do a lot of that transaction online, at least with BMW, do a lot of that transaction online to save time. But they want to come in and they want to drive it, they want to feel it.
And they want input. They want a professional opinion from a reasonable veteran guy or gal who knows their stuff to bounce a few things off of them. And that same person is the one that's going to be in touch on that order. If something, because we see it right now still, gets decontented, it changes. You build it this way, and then everybody gets a notice, hey, no, can't do these wheels, right, and can't do this option, and this color's gone.
Is that a
and then you got to hop on the phone and figure that out, like what's plan B? Let's talk about plan B. And if you're leaving it up entirely to the factory, I don't think they're at a level to communicate and suggest and pivot like your guy or gal at the store.
Yeah, I know that if I'm doing my online build, that it'll say, hey, you can't use those wheels with that trim package, but are you saying that there are even more combinations that aren't possible that you would need to go through
and
and
figure it out? Well, what you build can change 3 or 4 weeks later, and sometimes that online tool simply isn't accurate because that tool the client's using is not the one we're using in the dealership. And you can build something online that can't be built and ordered, and vice versa.
Right.
Yeah, there were conversations we had just coming out of the pandemic where someone would buy a $90,000 car, and you had to call that customer up and say, hey, great news, car will be here shortly, there's no power seat.
Yeah,
and no power seat. I mean, when was the last time you
reached down and scooted up,
and and they took the car. I mean, customers right when they were coming out of the pandemic, customers were actually pretty understanding of, hey, this is an environment we're in, chip shortages, all right, it is what it is. Oh, but you can upfit it once the chips, this is how it's going to be for the life of the ownership. Okay, off they go.
Mike, I want to turn it back over to you. We touched on it a little bit, pricing. Things got a little out of whack during the pandemic, during the worst of the pandemic. For especially desirable models, should people expect to pay sticker or even a premium right now?
Well, we never charged over sticker, and certainly some dealers did, and that was an individual decision. Right now, it's a little bit more aggressive. I would say it's probably peeled back a couple percent, maybe 1,000 to 1,500, and depending on the brand and depending on the market, that's going to vary. But like I remind my team, and like I remind our customers, and even myself, I believe clearly the entry point is higher, but also think the exit point's higher. I'm not sure that the delta, the true cost of ownership, has changed that much, right? You used to pay 55 or 60 and get 20 something, and now you're paying maybe 62 or 65, but your car's worth 30 at the end. So I think that delta is still similar to what it was, say 2019. The trickiest part is interest rates. It's when you're going to mitigate that difference, whether you're leasing or financing. It's simply more expensive to do so. But I think what's happened in the marketplace has been good for clients on resale value.
And we'll dig into that in a second. But Patrick, what's your experience with pricing right now?
I think we're starting to see it come back a little bit. Again, as Mike alluded to, it's very brand specific. So you might go to like our Jaguar Land Rover dealership where it's very tough to get something like a full-size Range Rover or a Range Rover Sport. These are vehicles that were just recently redesigned. And we have probably 6 to 8 month wait lists on those particular cars. So the pricing on those is kind of maintained at a level that it was at. Some of our other brands like Toyota, we have Cadillac as well, Infiniti, Nissan. We are starting to see the prices come back, and we're even starting to see some incentives come out as well. And it's been a few years since we've had any incentives or manufacturer support. So it's nice to see that some of that's out there as well now.
So are you talking under sticker on some of these cars?
On some of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But others you're paying the sticker price?
Others, it really just depends on what the supply is. Some have kind of retained that MSRP level. Some have come back a little bit. But I would definitely say that we're finally at a place where there are some deals to be had, whereas for years we were in a place where it was pretty much impossible to find anything, and that was kind of consistent industry-wide. We've come back to a place where if you do the right research, you find the right car, there's definitely some opportunities out there on the market right now.
Matt, are you seeing prices at sticker or at a premium?
It's supply and demand, right? I think it's brand specific for sure. But I think where certain cars are more difficult to get, more desirable, you may hold the line a little bit more on those because there really isn't a reason to bottom it out and get rid of it because pretty soon someone's going to walk up and take it. And I think as operators, operational expenses have risen, certainly recently with the rising interest rates. The holding cost, as inventory has expanded, the holding cost of the inventory has gone up. So you have to be real mindful of how you're pricing your cars and how you're executing those transactions because the expense base has come up so much recently that you want to make sure the business is healthy. That said, for sure, if something is sitting for a little while or you've got a lot of something, you're going to tend to be a little bit more aggressive on that car. Or if there's a story to be told, a relationship, like you were saying before, or maybe someone was coming out of a certain car and you want to make sure they stay with the brand. Those decisions, you make on the spot. But overall, it's a supply and demand story still, but we are mindful of our expense structure and making sure that we can remain healthy.
Yeah, interesting that you point out that the rising interest rates are kind of hurting you in multiple ways that customers might not have realized before.
Yeah, cars are, for most part, most of us keep all of these millions and millions of dollars in cars on a line of credit. And if anyone has seen their credit card bill, certainly that has gone up. So, we have to be careful about that. That works both ways, by the way, right? Because if the interest rates are coming up, so the holding cost is going up, you might be more inclined to move something a little quick and take that shorter deal to get it off your credit line. So, it's fluid, it's constantly moving. You just have to get all those pieces together so they make sense. Now,
the higher interest rates are affecting you guys, as I just learned. Of course, it's also affecting customers. Have you had instances where customers thought they could maybe afford a $60,000 or $70,000 car and you had to tell them what the interest rate was and they had to reset their expectations?
Absolutely, both with leases and regular finance deals. Clients coming out of whatever they bought in 17 or 18 or 19 or even in the panic of the spring of 2020, that's been the toughest thing, is having that conversation about what the payment is now. That $450 lease went to $680, $699 is $910. And the good news is we're almost out of that window, right? Most of our leases are 3 years. So everybody coming out now was starting to buy in the summer of 2020 when prices started climbing, payments started climbing. But that has been the biggest challenge, I would say, that my sales team would cite is simple affordability, because for a long time your payments were fairly similar, right? Cars would go up, but because of manufacturer incentives and aggressiveness on the dealer and super low rates, payments didn't move too much, and everybody would look at their deal as, what was my last payment? I'm getting something similar. What's that payment? And most of the time it was very close. Completely different story now.
So what are customers doing? Are they resetting their expectations, getting something less? Are they getting frustrated and walking away, Patrick?
I wouldn't say that they're getting frustrated and walking away. I think a lot of these customers have had some money on the sidelines for the last few years. So, and much of that money is invested in places where they've been earning good interest on some of the cash they've had in those types of accounts, money market accounts and what have you. So I think once you kind of overcome or explain to them the change and the shift, and kind of just walk them through in a gentle way and help them understand, you'll either see that they'll step up and go with the vehicle that they've been accustomed to, or they might make a modification and go with a different type of car. It's kind of our responsibility to help them kind of navigate through that process, and just at the end of the day, they're there to get a car, and it's our job to help them find one, and to make sure that it's affordable for them. So no, we're not having anyone who's walking out discouraged.
Or maybe just waiting, saying, I'll wait this out, something like that.
There's some of that, a little waiting it out. We'll wait till there's more inventories and maybe there's some more support from the manufacturers. So there is a little bit of that, but at least at our stores, we haven't had any experiences where people have just abruptly exited or anything like that. Fortunately, I haven't had that.
So should customers come in knowing their financial situation so that they can get a better idea of what their out-the-door price is going to be?
I think most consumers that come in, they've gone out and bought a carton of milk. They've gone out and purchased, X, Y, and Z, and they see that the cost of most goods have gone up. So it's not a difficult conversation to have. It's a great point on the money they have sitting on the sidelines. If that is the case, they're getting a better rate of interest on that. So yes, you're having that conversation, like Mike said, almost across the board, because there's very few instances where someone is coming in and paying less than they were. Now, used car market values are up because units and operations through the pandemic were much lower, supply was much lower, so they are getting more for their trade-in. So it's helping to offset that a bit, but they're used to paying more for what they're buying.
Yeah.
So I do think they are very in tune with what their finances are, because everyone's watching, as we are as operators, watching every expense. So they are in tune with that, and I think they're ready to make an educated decision when they get there.
We mentioned it earlier, but let's dive into leasing. Of course, the interest rates are baked into that lease payment. Mm-hmm. It's in there. You can do the math and figure it out if you really want to.
Sure.
Are manufacturers still giving the incentives for you to make these leases happen? Are they giving you the residuals you need? Are they giving you the money factor you need in order to make leases happen? Or are they focusing on buying? Where are the manufacturers right now?
They have, I'm going to say, in the last 6 to 9 months. They didn't need to, right? Patrick mentioned it earlier. They did not need to incentivize hardly any of their models. And what we talked about in so many meetings in late 2020 and throughout 2021 was, let's focus on 23 and 24 and 25, right? Our behavior now is going to determine how successful we are in 3 and 4 and 5 years, and we need to make sure we're doing something for these loyal clients. So recently, for example, BMW is allowing a 39-month lease, but giving the 36-month or higher residual for their loyal clients, and a lower interest rate on those leases. They are trying to tweak that program to get leasing, to get a higher percentage of leasing. We used to be, 65, 70%, and that went all the way to about 15 or 20. Now it's crept back to 35. But it's much healthier for us to have a lot of our clients in the lease. We want you in the newest car, the newest technology, updated safety features. We don't want you getting into a point where you've got a lot of maintenance expense or get outside of warranty. And we want that car back in 3 years for our used car department, and we want you back as a customer in another car. So I think they're a little late, right? We wanted it earlier, but we're starting to get it now, at least in this brand.
My wife has made a similar sales pitch on the lease. She doesn't want the hassle of ownership. She wants the new car every few years. Patrick, I want to get to you in a second because
Sure,
you're going to
yeah.
have different experiences with your different models. But what's your experience been with the manufacturers in terms of leasing incentives right now?
Yeah, I think Mike said it perfectly. We are creeping back up into that 30 to 35% range, and I think part of that reason is we're leasing a lot more electric vehicles than we were, because depending on the model, you're looking at in incentives in the dealership, not just whatever the tax incentives are you have personally, but you can get over $7,000-8,000 in lease incentives on electric vehicles, and we are leasing a lot of those. So I think our lease portfolio is growing because of the EV market is so strong down in this area that, I mean, there's an i4 3.5 that with all the incentives, we're advertising a lease price under $500 a month. When was the last time we had a lease under $500 a month?
Yeah. That's terrific.
So that car, that car's gone. We can't keep those in stock.
Yep.
So I am seeing the portfolio increase a little bit because of the incentive the manufacturers are putting out.
Yeah, and we definitely want to get into the electrics in a bit. But Patrick, I'm sure it's a very different experience on leasing based on all your different brands. Can you kind of break it out for us?
Sure. I'll piggyback a little bit on the EV comment because we actually have a few new EVs that just hit our showrooms in the last few months, and we're finding the adoption of those EVs has been a little bit slower than we would have expected. And there's a lot of options out there right now.
Any ones in particular you're talking about?
Well, we've got the Nissan Ariya that just arrived, and we've got the Toyota BZ4X, and they came to market relatively quickly. And there's a lot of different types of availability of different cars out on the market right now. And I will say, just in the last few months, both of those manufacturers have come out with lease programs to kind of get them out on the road, get some visibility of those vehicles. So I think there are some lease deals to be had, and there's uniquely some lease deals to be had on EVs and those two models.
All right, guys, I want to turn to EVs. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but I was personally struck by a survey I saw recently from KPMG. It found roughly 50% of U.S. car buyers are interested in purchasing an EV, and of those shoppers, most said they expected to own an electric car by 2025. I know that especially in this area, there's a lot of interest. Matt, you're an EV driver, an adopter.
I am.
What are your thoughts? Obviously, you've bought in, but more importantly, what are customers telling you?
Customers love it. They absolutely love it. I know I've owned an electric vehicle now for about a year. It's a BMW iX, that their truck version of that car. I overcame what I think the biggest pain point is for customers, which is how can I charge it? I can't go to a gas station, I can't get in and out in 10 minutes or less or more maybe. How am I going to own this car? And that is tough. And I commute oftentimes from down in here, Washington, D.C. area, and I have live up in the tri-state New York area. How am I going to manage that? And after just a few short weeks, that's not even a thought for me anymore. So I talk to customers all the time about that range anxiety that is sort of holding them back. And when I say I haven't been to a gas station in over a year, and I mean it, that starts to resonate after a while. And say, this is how I do it, and this is maybe how you can do it. It's not an issue for me at all. Does it require a little bit of planning? It does sometimes, but so does going to a gas station. If you're running low on gas and you're not quite sure where you are, you're looking at gas apps, you're trying to figure where I can go. So there's a little bit of planning involved. So do I have to do that little bit of planning every once in a while on a new route? I do. But I'm such a fan of that car. I'm a performance guy. I love performance. And the speed, the handling, the cornering that I get from that EV, the technology is, I'm all in. I absolutely love it.
So what is your system for making charging work for you?
Well, we're creatures of habit, right? We do certain things certain ways. I'm coming here to sit here with y'all, and driving about 20, 30 minutes or so. Did I get on my phone and check my app and see how much charge I have? I did. And if I needed a little bit more, I would have planned a little bit ahead, popped into a high-speed charger for 10 minutes or so, and topped off my charge. So I do a little bit of planning, but we're a technology industry now, and I utilize that technology to my advantage, and it just takes away all of that anxiety for me, and as well for customers as they get more used to it. So we can get into the weeds on how that works, but there's so much tech in that car that if you're approaching a low charge, there's more information you can possibly imagine to get to where you go, where you need to go, and get charged up and get on your way. So it's a non-issue for me.
Patrick, what's your experience been with customers talking to you about EV interest, and how is it different based on different brands, mass market brands versus luxury brands?
I think maybe just to comment a little bit on what Matt had mentioned before, I think some of it does actually, some of the interest does pertain a little bit to personality type. I currently drive a Toyota Sequoia, which is nearly 6,000 pounds, and it's a hybrid, and I love it. It's a phenomenal car. I've driven EVs before. They're not personally for me, but again, it's kind of a personal kind of whatever accommodates a customer's interest the best and the most.
Do you think is as much as half of your customers expressing interest?
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. I think we've got a lot of legacy Prius customers, a lot of legacy hybrid customers, RAV4 hybrid, things like that, and they're more than happy to come in and continue to be using gas, knowing that they're getting 50 miles per gallon or 60 miles per gallon, and not having to worry about installing a charger at their home, and being able to travel to their vacation home and not worry about where to charge and things like that. So I don't think we're quite at our dealership, at least at the space where 1 and 2 that are coming in are expressing interest. It's probably 1 and 4, and of those 1 and 4, we show them the options that we have, and some more context to this. There's also both state and federal tax incentives that are available that aren't necessarily available in every single car. So I think a lot of our customers have to do kind of a cost-benefit analysis to determine, am I going to get the tax credit on this particular car or not? If I am, is it going to be worthwhile? How much is, for example, a RAV4 versus a RAV4 Prime, which is considered a plug-in hybrid?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, hopefully they can make an informed and educated decision about what best suits their needs.
Mike, where are your customers at on EVs?
They might be close to 50% as far as a consideration. I think maybe it's closer to a third as far as truly considering to make that move now. Maybe half of them are if you go 3 years out, can see themselves in one. What most of them are pleasantly surprised about, and Matt, I think, alluded to this, is the performance, the power, how quick they are, how good they feel. So we see folks coming in somewhat considering it, decide to take a test drive, and then find themselves seriously considering it. And then it's just a matter, again, about range and thinking about, okay, well, how do I work this into my life? And when you start explaining all of the options they have available to them in just a matter of 3 or 4 years, it's completely different now how easy it is to get set up at home, depending on what their work setup is, or their condo, wherever they live, and then their lifestyle. And we have a fair amount of clients that have, they have 2 and 3 cars, and they've got 2 gas vehicles, and they've got an electric car, and they absolutely love it. And then when they're loading up to go down to the beach, they're doing it in a bigger rig with gas. They're not fully committed in their own little fleet. But yeah, we're probably 1 out of 5 sales now are electric. At our store, 15 to 20%, in which BMW wanted to get to 1 in 5, and it's something they said at the start of the year, and I thought that was a little robust, but that's about where they are.
BMWs are, go ahead.
No, that's great numbers. Yeah.
I was going to say BMWs are not known for being dull. So for someone to drive one of your internal combustion cars and then say that something is performance oriented and interesting is saying something.
We're also in a great area. I think outside of California, this is probably the strongest market for them, the DC area.
Oh, for sure.
It is with our brand.
You can see that with, you can see that. We have access to so many other brands and information, and I do as well. So that you can see that. I mean, this area for sure is big in electrification.
Yep.
I very rarely hear from a customer that bought an EV that is unhappy with it. I haven't heard that very often, if at all. So I feel like it's getting traction as the infrastructure is kind of building out, and the accessibility of high-speed chargers is becoming easier to find. It's eliminating a lot of those reasons. And at home, do you need to put a level 3 charger in, somewhere? That'd be great. I wouldn't mind doing that. But you could also just put a 240 volt outlet box there on the outside of your garage or somewhere, and the cars come with a cable. Plug it in. You get home at night, plug in your car. We wake up in the morning, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Electric vehicle makers, Tesla, have gotten people conditioned to the idea that you go online.
That's a bad word. Why are we talking about Tesla?
I know. I apologize to bring it up to a bunch of franchise dealers, but they've gotten people conditioned to the point where you think you go online, you click some buttons, and you get a car delivered to your door. Will franchise dealers get to that point where you will have all online ordering? You told us earlier that probably not, because you think you need that human interface to kind of smooth over the rough edges of a pretty complex transaction.
It's true. I think maybe with some brands it's easier to do than others, but when you're getting into those performance brands, but people really want to get in those and touch and feel those cars, feel the performance, fall in love with it. Whereas if it's not so much that, and it's more of a transactional experience, that might be a little bit easier to execute completely online.
If you don't have that many options to choose from
Right.
to begin with, the configurations in so many of our brands are almost endless. I'm not sure that it's the same with some of these other manufacturers that are relying more on online.
Can your customers order online, Patrick, or will they be able to one day?
They can, and I think that will continue to kind of progress and get closer to that Tesla experience. It'll be an option. I think what will remain to be seen is whether customers decide to go that avenue or continue to kind of do either a mix of a traditional process in tandem with going online. I do think that there is, and again, here we are with all franchise dealers, there is a lot of value in those relationships. There's a lot of value in being able to call someone and have a quick conversation, someone you more than likely know and have done business with before. And that's just as it relates to the actual transaction process when you're buying a new car. Down the road, when you've got a flat tire, when you have some brake trouble or whatever it might be, I think there's a lot of value in being able to connect with someone at the dealership, and that could be at any level. It could be a service advisor, someone you've known for many years. So I do think that the relationship element of it is going to continue to kind of build value for customers. And I think as they do more business, the digital path, they'll perhaps recognize that there is that more value in the traditional path as well, or at least some sort of hybrid of the two.
I want to hear about an amazing new product you're excited about, or a feature that you're excited about. You were telling me your car's parking itself with your phone.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So
what we did today. That's how
you can use an app on my BMW app that the car, you can set the car to it happens now automatically. As you're driving, you can see in the top right corner of the display, it'll say searching. And the car there's 36 something cameras in a BMW iX. It's looking for open spots. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you put it in reverse, it remembers where one of the open spots was, and it tells you to take your foot off the brake, take your hands off the wheel, and you just sit back. I did a video of this on LinkedIn. And the car will work its way in. If people are coming, which happens, it stops, it waits, it goes in. And then when you get out of the car, you can take the app and automatically pull it back out, as long as you're within Bluetooth range.
Okay.
So if you're in a tight spot, you live down here. I live in Reston Town Center, and my parking spot is tight with a concrete pole there. And it is nice to be able to step out of my car, stop it there, and just hit automatic parking and let it pull itself in. It's
funny you say that. I met my son a week ago over in McLean. He was meeting me at a place, and he was pulling in an X6. And he's 18, and there was a really nice space right there, and I was standing outside because we were waiting to go in, and I kind of waved him down the little driveway, and I said, right here, and he just came rolling by it, not looking at the space like I would to size it up and then put my arm back and then start doing this, and he just rolled up till it engaged, right, and then it parked itself. And I came walking up to him when he got in there. I said, don't make me watch that. Like, that was awful. Like, what? Well, what is that?
Yeah.
It's over, right?
Yeah.
It's over. We're dinosaurs.
Yeah. I am a phenomenal parker too, but I just think it helps with the thing.
Of course.
Aren't we all?
Let the robot do it. Patrick, what are you excited about?
Well, I'm going to go against the grain here a little bit on some of the cars. And I talked a lot about EV today. But what we haven't talked about much is how certain cars drive. Some new products that we've just received in the last year, the full-size new Range Rover, the Range Rover Sport, not EVs, not hybrids, but some of the smoothest, most phenomenally driving vehicles I've ever been behind the wheel of. So I think there's still some of that goes into when you're buying a car, especially at that top end. It's not just about what's under the hood or not under the hood. A lot of it is about how does this car drive, how does it make me feel. the interior, what the interiors are like, some things like that. So those two cars in particular I'm super excited about. They've done great for us, and there's been a tremendous amount of interest. To kind of move over to our Cadillac brand, and again, continue to go against the grain here a little bit. The all-new Escalade that came out, it's been out for about a year and a half or so. Every one we get is pre-sold. Again, it's gas-powered car. It's a 6,000-pound truck, but we can't keep them on the lots. So there is still, there's the EV interest, but then there's the whole other side of the plane. And it's not going to be that way forever, because inevitably these cars are going to have to make those transitions, and it's going to be mandated to do so. But those type of kind of last of the frontier of the fuel engine cars, I'm still excited about, and a lot of our customers are as well. I'll add just one more, and that's the Cadillac Lyriq, which I haven't spoke about today, and that's another EV, new EV that just came out with our Cadillac brand that's been tremendously popular. Beautiful looking car, drives great, super refined interior. So it's another one I think people should get out and check out.
Before I let you guys go, you at your dealership are getting a Bugatti. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Personally,
No.
It's going to add maybe a couple miles to it before you take
Yeah,
get it
so
for delivery.
we have a Bugatti franchise. We've got about 12 chassis sold, I believe. The very first one is coming in towards the end of this month. It's definitely an event. The car arrives in a crate. It's about a little over $4 million vehicle. We have a camera crew that's going to film that all the way to where it gets to the store, and we have to prep it there. So yeah, I think we are the #1 Bugatti dealer in the world right now. Just in terms of when we got the franchise about 6-7 months ago to how many chassis we've sold. So that top end of the market, like you mentioned, Pat, is still very much there.
Yep.
I mean, the car's 16-cylinder, monster. It's incredible.
yeah.
We'll be watching for it. That'll
I'll
do
take it over next time. Sorry.
That'll do it for now. I'm John Aaron, along with Mike Walker of BMW of Fairfax, Matthew Bibbo of BMW Mini of Sterling and Washington Exotics, and Patrick Coleman of Jim Coleman Automotive. Thank you for joining us for this edition of What's Driving the DMV.